Andor Episode 7 announcement. With the big heist on Aldhani complete, this week's episode instead focused on its aftermath, though through the perspectives of each of this show's major players. For the most part, this is interestingly a standalone episode rather than part of a 3-episode arc that we've had in Andor thus far. And even though this is supposed to be something that gives the show a breather, that's not to say nothing happens here, as plenty definitely does through several character-driven stories. The first is through the ISB, as with the Empire spooked on how such a terrorist attack could ever happen against them, paranoia runs rampant throughout every high-level Imperial, and heavier and stricter taxes and laws are placed as a scare tactic, with Colonel Wolf Yularen even making his first cameo appearance in the series as he instructs how the Empire plans to retaliate to this so-called terrorist attack. Everyone within the ISB seems to be happy with these decisions taking place, all except Deidra Miro, who believes that the Empire is falling right into the Rebels' hands, and instead starts her own research behind the scenes on Rebel activity throughout all of the sectors, doing so without any permission of anyone else thanks to the newly enacted Imperial Emergency Act. At a later meeting, she ends up getting publicly called out for it by Blevin, who lodges a complaint against her for ignoring the chain of command and overreaching into his sector. Despite Deidra not expecting this to happen at all, she ends up surprising everyone in the room by admitting that by doing so what she did, she was able to find a link between the theft of Imperial secret equipment and its distribution to rebel groups across the whole galaxy. And just wow, I absolutely love that this show got me to root for an Imperial officer. An ISB one no less, and Deidra is clearly meant to be an antagonist, but the satisfaction I felt in watching her put Blevin in his place was so good. But that's what good writing does after all. Anyway, the news ends up pleasing Partagaz, who commends Deidra for thinking outside the box, unlike everyone else, even later advising her to watch her back, as no doubt no one in the ISB is happy to be outshone by a rookie. And this here shows us that familiar Imperial incompetence that we're all so used to, but in a more subtle manner, as the ISB is bickering and debating on who should have real authority, instead of pooling all of their resources into, actually figuring out who stole from them. Because by doing so, they're only making things worse for themselves and giving the rebels a huge advantage here. They're too blinded by their "I'm too big to fail" mindset, which, is a classic Imperial downfall. And the decision to bring in even stricter and draconian laws, thinking that will help scare everyone into line, only reminds me of Leia's line to Tarkin in A New Hope. Which, as you all know, is the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip right through your fingers. Amazing stuff. In the politics side of the story, Mon Mothma visits Luthen, believing that the Aldhani terrorist attack was orchestrated by him. With Luthen confirming her suspicions to be true, she's disgusted by his tactics and believes for them to be far too much, as the consequences for this attack will only hurt everyone else in the galaxy, while Luthen at the same time is happy with his actions, as that's exactly what he wants, as he thinks that by pushing the Empire to show more of its evil to everyone is required in order to wake more people up to what's going on and for them to rebel back. And as for whether which one of them is right or wrong here, that's a different topic for another time. But already we're seeing infighting happen between the rebels on how the Greater Rebellion should look like. On a side note, there's a Jedi Temple guard helmet seen in the background of Luthen's shop, which I'm not sure if it was there before or not, but it did catch my eye here for sure. And to those saying that there are no Easter eggs in this show, look harder, guys. On another note, I did find it fascinating how big of a role Clea plays in all of this. such as even recruiting everyone that we see in the Aldhani Rebels group as well. Granted, I always figured she was more than just Luthen's shop assistant, but dang, it seems that we've all still underestimated her, and I'm excited to see what more we can unravel from her character now. Anywho, later at a dinner party, Mon meets with a visiting Chandrilan named Tay Kolma, who's an old friend and a banker, and it's through him that she looks for a way in helping with her rebellion money issues. And boy, was my heart pounding in this entire scene. The tension here was so intense, with ISB officers and Imperial loyalists all in the background. Meanwhile, Mon is here literally talking about her secrets out in the open, such as that the whole Mon Mothma everyone knows in public is only a front, a distraction, a lie. Something that she's learned from Palpatine, of course, all to hide from what she's really working on. And hey, like Palpatine working on his secret Death Star plans, two can play at that game, with Mon Mothma working on the secret Rebel Alliance. Meanwhile, Cassian's story here is a little less of the focus, but we still get a good chunk of it. We do see him returning back to Ferrix to finish some unfinished business. However, everything ends up going just the opposite of what he planned for. Like Bix, who's now I believe to be confirmed to be a former love interest of his, wants nothing to do with him anymore. While at the same time, his adoptive mother, Maarva, who he had hoped to leave the planet together with her thanks to his heist winnings, instead wants to stay and fight the Empire on Ferrix, revealing that the attack on Aldhani only inspired the rebel within her, which is kind of ironic, as everyone sees what happened on Aldhani as a rebel response to the Empire, giving many people around the galaxy hope that standing up to the Imperial war machine is in fact possible. Well, everyone but for Cassian, who doesn't exactly see things that way, and only really keeps downplaying the entire thing as a simple robbery. Because for him, becoming a rebel seems to be the last thing he wants to do. It's also during this time on Ferrix that we get to see some real emotional flashbacks to the Empire's first arrival to the planet, revealing how and why his adoptive father, Clem, was arrested and publicly executed, all without any of it being his fault either. We afterwards meet up with Cassian on a new planet named Nemos, which I suppose you can call Space Florida. He's relaxing in a tropical destination, sleeping around with women he barely knows, and getting drunk without a care in the world on what's going on around him. Basically, he's living it up with his new riches, but at the same time, he's still no doubt paranoid. And that same paranoia is exactly what makes him look so suspicious and gets him arrested by the Empire. I mean, sure, it's for some drummed up stupid charges that some shore trooper made up for him on the spot simply to make himself look better, but in a way, I suppose you can say that this is the Force's way of telling Cassian that, hey, wake up already and become a rebel. That said, let me just say how amazing the music in this entire beach scene was. And to see the KX series security droids in live action again just felt so good. Lastly, we're still following Cyril Karn's story, which so far, to be fair, there really hasn't been much happening there. He gets criticized by his mom, hired into the Bureau of Standards serving in fuel purity thanks to a favor from his uncle Harlow, and well, you can tell he loathes the entirety of it. This isn't him, because he actually showed initiative and tried to track down a murderer. However misguided he may have been about the whole thing, he ultimately gets tossed aside. And yeah, you just can't help but feel for the guy because he knows there's a bigger issue afoot. He knows he's got a bigger purpose than just doing this. But because he acted on his suspicions rather than remain apathetic like his superiors, he's getting punished by having to find work as a drone in a dead-end job. And that's just how good this show's writing is. It finds a way to make you care about characters we're supposed to dislike. Now, despite all of the good I said about this episode, I did have, some nitpicks that I found annoying. The first is that I was hoping to see the ISB do their thing on Aldhani and, see the repercussions for Cinta's war crimes. Which unfortunately we don't see any of that at all here, nor do we see her war crimes even mentioned, which I found a bit strange. Now, whether we'll return back to this topic or not in future episodes, well, that remains to be seen. And speaking about the ISB, I really hated how they chose Malcolm Sinclair to play Wolf Yularen. I mean, sure, he'd make for an okay Yularen cosplay at a Halloween party, but as the live-action canon modern version of him? Hell nah. Other than being a white British guy, the dude looks nothing like Yularen, who we've seen in A New Hope, as he's got a different shaped head, facial structure, and nowhere near his standout eyebrows. Had I not had my subtitles tell me that this was supposed to be Yularen, I wouldn't have known. So far for me, this is a pretty big blunder by the casting department. Yikes. I also didn't like the show randomly shoehorning the Alderaanian fleet trooper helmet into some random dudes on Coruscant. I'm not sure if these guys are supposed to be part of the Alderaanian government or not, but again, it just seems random and unnecessary to have such well-known military gear show up in what is a scene full of civilians. It just makes me scratch my head and go like, why? Lastly, I also didn't care for how we're introduced to another new planet, and yet again, it's full of British accents. Well, everyone there has one but the shore troopers because, like I said before, there's a good reason why stormtroopers have American accents and that we've never heard of one with a British accent. At least in full gear, that is, and I'm probably gonna have to make a video about that very soon. But yeah, as much as I loved last week's episode, I think I loved this one a bit more, despite the annoying nitpicks that I mentioned. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing the fallout of the heist, with the Empire laying down draconian fines, taxes, restrictions, and punishments, all in an effort to quash any other acts of violence or sedition. Plus, seeing Mon Mothma believing that she's backing the wrong horse of Luthen and looking to dip into her own funds to finance her rebel network, Maarva's talk with Cassian having a kind of old-school Star Wars heart to it without it feeling forced. Oh, and did I mention there's finally aliens back on this show again too? Yeah, there's just so much goodness here that despite it all being mainly dialogue and no action, I think that's what makes Andor so great. The world building, the conversations, it all feels so real, so good. Because that's just it, the show really does a fantastic job at making normal conversations seem interesting and real. And all of these character-driven stories constantly want me coming back for more. That's how you know a show, despite having flaws, is pretty darn good. And that was my take on this episode of Andor. Let me know what you all thought about the episode in the comments below, and if you haven't already, remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.